Well, damn. We're in October already? I mean, it always feels like when you start getting used to the year, it ends. That's just how it goes. 12 months, I guess. You get used to it by like June, July, and then it's September. September's over. But anyway, I don't want this to go on for too long. So yeah, read some books in September. Let's get to them. Hello, everyone. Britton here, also known as Some Okie Dude, and I am back with another video talking about what I read during the month of September. We are getting towards the latter months, people. We are getting towards the latter months of the year. I can't believe it. We're barreling towards the end of 2025. I thought it would take a little longer, but here we are in October now, and I'm here to talk about what's going on in September before we get into spooky time. Anyway, books I read during September, and stories, and comics. I'm going to be talking about them today. I actually got less done than I thought I would. I actually felt like a pretty productive reading month, but, I still got some stuff done. So, yeah, I guess we should get into it before too long. So, yeah, let me just scratch my nose real quick. Let's do it. Alright, so the first book I read was actually for a class I've been taking recently. You may have heard in my last what I read, but I'm doing a class about science fiction, which is a genre that I love and have a lot of affinity towards. And generally, when there's a class about certain types of genre fiction, I would be remiss not to take it. So the book that I had to read for this month, well, there's a couple I read, but the book I read this month was The Island of Dr. Moreau by H.G. Wells. This is the one H.G. Wells classic that I haven't actually read. I'm actually quite fond of H.G. Wells. I'm fond of The Invisible Man, and especially The Time Machine, which I read last month. Were favorites of the favorites in Summer's childhood, we'll say. But I never really got around to The Island of Dr. Moreau, and I ended up reading it finally in September. What did I think of it? It's pretty good for the most part. I don't know if I like it as much as I enjoy the latter two books I mentioned, that being The Invisible Man and The Time Machine. Though I will say it's a lot better than War of the Worlds. It doesn't feel quite as much like a very dry news report. This is very much a narrative. Fans of Heart of Darkness might enjoy this because it's very much very Heart of Darkness adjacent, except that the supernatural, surreal elements that made Heart of Darkness such a classic, it's a bit more literal in Island of Dr. Moreau, and I actually think this book came out before before Heart of Darkness. Sorry, I'm a bit brain fried today. But I enjoyed this book. I thought it was a really good read. I could definitely see how this book inspired a lot of the people who came after, especially China Miéville. If you're familiar with the Baslag remade process, then you will definitely be familiar with some of the bizarre human-animal monstrosities that are in this book. You will definitely be, if you have read Baslag, as I have, you will definitely be thinking about the remade, because you can tell that the remade basically came from this book here, except they use magic and Baslag and not, well, science. Like I said, it's not as good as some of his best work, but I do think it's a solid read. It's definitely influential. I do think that many science fiction writers, and fantasy authors for that matter, have been inspired by this book. And it definitely talks about things that still happen today, such as how far should we take science, and should we take science, and what happens when we do science without really any consideration towards humanity or compassion or kindness. Very good cautionary tale type of science fiction, though not really one. Just be aware that you might roll your eyes at this, but this was revolutionary back when it came out. And I still think it holds up for the most part. It's definitely not like other older science fiction where it's just about the ideas. Wells is generally good at getting into the psychology of what's going on, so that's always really good. But yeah, Island of Dr. Moreau, good book. Not really much else to say about it, so I'll just put it down. Next book is the second book of the LA Quartet. Yes, I return to the world of the demon dog himself, James Ellroy, and that is The Big Nowhere by James Ellroy, which was probably my favorite read of the month. I really enjoyed this book a lot. It's been interesting going back in the LA Quartet because I started with LA Confidential, which I don't recommend. It's a very long, dense book that might throw you off with its style. And a lot of people have asked me, since I like Ellroy a lot, where should you start with Ellroy? And I actually think The Big Nowhere would be a really good place to start because The Big Nowhere is a much more approachable novel. It's a bit more conventionally written than some of his other stuff that's very much in that kind of staccato, very brief, muscular prose that might throw some people off. But this is a bit more conventionally written, but it does deal with a lot of the themes that Ellroy would play with later on down the line, such as the three protagonists, how small players impact history, corruption, paranoia, and there's also some really great characters in this. Buzz Meeks, in particular, was one that I really liked. And no, not just because he is an Oklahoman, such as myself. If that is the case, he's a very bad representation of Oklahoma, because he's not a very nice man. But he does have a conscience, and he does want to do some good. He is pretty content with being a scumbag. But he is a great character, and it's definitely a shame what happens to him in L.A. Confidential, which I won't comment. Though it's not, it wouldn't really be a spoiler because what happens to him happens at the very beginning of L.A. Confidential. But he is a great character, though. I also think Danny Upshaw was a great character too, and he's definitely one of Ellroy's most tragic characters in a lot of ways. He's one of the few cops in the L.A. Quartet who has anything resembling a moral code that he does not break no matter what. He is very much like, I tried really hard as I read this book not to compare this book to L.A. Confidential too much, but it was really hard. I could definitely see how Ellroy was building to what would eventually become L.A. Confidential. And you could definitely see foils in certain characters. Like with Buzz Meeks, you could definitely see traces of Jack Vincennes, and even Bud White, with how he, uses his muscle to intimidate people. But there's also a calculating intelligence that hides beneath the bluster, if you will. And with Jack Vincennes, you can definitely see with Buzz Meeks that kind of world-weary cynicism, but also that lingering guilt, that sense that he could have done something better with himself, but these are the options that his life has given him, really. But with Danny Upshaw, I really see a connection with Ed Exley. I'll talk about this because I am hoping to have a discussion on The Big Nowhere with a friend of mine. You might recognize him, Jay Sheik. I had him on my podcast before. He's a good friend of mine. Also really likes Ellroy. And he really was kind of my sounding board as I was going through The Big Nowhere. But I will say that Upshaw reminded me a lot of Ed Exley. You can definitely see that with Danny, he was really building up to Ed Exley. But there's a lot of things that are very different about Danny. He's very tragic. He has a secret that's very embarrassing to him that he doesn't really know how to cope with. And the case that he ends up taking on really causes him to have to unfold that dark secret, if you will. It's also just a really damn good mystery with really compelling characters. I really enjoyed this book a lot, and I definitely would say to check this book out first out of the Ellroy books that I would recommend. I mean, it's kind of hard to recommend where to start, but I do think The Big Nowhere would be a really good start. You can ignore Black Dahlia if you want. Black Dahlia is kind of a weird, messy thing that James Ellroy did before he really kind of was like, okay, this is what I want the LA Quartet to be. This book, I find, is really where he begins to kind of envision what the LA Quartet would look like. But The Big Nowhere was a fun book, and if you're a fan of Joe Abercrombie, I would recommend checking this book out, because you will because for one, he has described this as one of his favorite books, but also you could definitely see where he got some of his ideas from. particularly the three very flawed main protagonists. Though I find that trope is better done in L.A. Confidential in this one. I found two of the three main characters to be really interesting, but again, I'll save that for a discussion I'm hoping to have on this very book. But The Big Nowhere definitely was a book that kept my attention, and James Ellroy is just fantastic. Aside from Dennis Lehane, he might be the best American crime fiction writer who's living today. Easily the best noir writer who's living today. Speaking of Joe Abercrombie, though, I put it up to vote because, I guess I'm a masochist, and overwhelmingly people told me to read The Devils by Joe Abercrombie. It's his new book. I hadn't read Abercrombie in a while because I kind of got burned out on Joe after reading Best Served Cold. I was kind of Abercrombied out for a little while. But I did want to check out The Devils just to see what he would do in a non-First Law setting. And, oh boy, what a ride it was. Kind of going back to the Island of Dr. Moreau. If you're really into animal people, this book has animal people in spades. And if you're like my friend Jason and are just absolutely flabbergasted by animal people, I will warn you now, there are animal people. They are abominations. They're quite freaky. It's also Joe Abercrombie dealing in horror, which is interesting because I do think he has some legitimate chops. Even though I would like to see him write a grimy crime novel in the vein of James Ellroy, I do think he does specialize very well in horror too. Especially if you read The Last Argument of Kings, especially those last 100 pages, where he masterfully builds dread and really shows, and really tightens the noose, if you will, on all three of the main characters in that series. This book does have horror moments, definitely, but this is kind of Joe Abercrombie having fun, if you will. I had a friend of mine, Will McLaughlin, shout out to you, by the way, if he watches this, but I know Will McLaughlin described this to me as kind of a dumb action movie as a book, and that's really how I would describe this book. But this book was kind of disappointing, to be honest. I don't want to filibuster for too much longer, even though that's what I've been doing for the past 10 minutes or so. But The Devils was kind of a letdown in a lot of ways. I mean, I did have my expectations to pretty middling. I wasn't really expecting to like The Devils based on what I heard from certain people that I respect. But, I was kind of let down by this book. It really feels like Abercrombie is trying to do Abercrombie, for lack of a better word. It's really him kind of playing to what people expect of him, and it was a bit disappointing because, if you read The First Law, you realize just what a magnificent writer he can be, and this book just kind of feels like he's shooting below his weight. Really cornball dialogue that you would see like Joss Whedon do on a bad day. Because, Joss Whedon can write some really damn good dialogue. Go watch The Avengers if you really want to see him go off on all cylinders. But this book almost feels like British Joss Whedon. Or I should say, a very lazy British Joss Whedon. It was very disappointing. There is some of the good Abercrombie stuff that I like, such as unexpected character depth, the interactions between the characters, but generally it just kind of feels like his version of The Boys. And I have the same problems with this book that I have with the comic version of The Boys, which not necessarily mean-spirited, but definitely feels like the author is shooting below his weight for what he can do. And there's also just a lot of really goofy, over-the-top stuff that it just feels like Joe Abercrombie is just, again, he's just shooting below his weight. And it's just kind of disappointing in that sense. I don't know if I'll be reading any more of the Devil series, but, we'll see. The algorithm will likely demand it. But overall, I was just kind of let down by The Devils. I thought The Devils was just kind of... It was meh. I won't say it's a disaster like some of my friends have been saying, Jason, but it's definitely Joe Abercrombie's weakest book, with repetition, really goofy humor that doesn't always land. There is some of it that lands. There is some good humor in this, but there is just as much that just doesn't land. And there are just parts of this I got really frustrated at, where Abercrombie literally rips himself off. There is a part in this book, I swear to God, where a character literally quotes verbatim what Baez says in the third book of the first Lost series. It just feels super lazy. Also, the criticisms of religion in this has the amount of the sophistication of a 14-year-old on Reddit. Like, it's legitimately that bad. Like, Joe Abercrombie shows a little more grace than a 14-year-old on Reddit, but some of the criticisms of religion in this is just... I mean, I'm not, like, offended. Like, it's not, like, bad, but it's basic. It's so basic. It's just... The Devils, not good. I don't recommend it. Easily Joe Abercrombie's weakest book. Though, if you want a good starter for Joe Abercrombie and you want to warm somebody up for how good he can be, give The Devils a shot. But I personally didn't care for it, so yeah. Devils, just not good. The final book, I guess, that I'll talk about are actually two short stories by the same author, and I have returned to the world of Octavia Butler. I read this for my science fiction class as well. I read two of her short stories. I read Bloodchild, and I read Speech Sounds, which both of them were really, really good. Octavia Butler, man, I mean, I don't really know what to say that hasn't already been said on this platform, but she's just so good. Like, it's not even fair. Like, Kindred is I definitely liked these two stories less than Kindred, but these two stories are both really, really good, even without, considering that I read Kindred last year and it was my favorite book of the year. But Octavia Butler just has this way of talking about these really complicated ideas, but grounds it in a very approachable, very human way. Particularly in Bloodchild. Bloodchild is a story about exploitation and this weird alien world and the human beings that are on this weird alien world. But she grounds it in this story about this guy who is chosen for this particular thing, and he's not really sure what to make of it, and once he sees what it's actually going to happen, he garners second thoughts. And there's also themes of love in this story, and just how powerful a feeling love can be, whether it can be very positive or even negative. I mean, I'm generally pro, love. I think love can be a very positive thing, but sometimes it can be a negative thing too. And Bloodchild is one of those stories that not only talks about, big sci-fi ideas, but it also talks about these things such as exploitation and the very intense power of human love. As for Speech Sounds is another just kind of weird story about a virus that just ravages humanity, but it also robs people of their speech. Kind of think of it as the virus from Planet of the Apes, once it mutates in War of the Planet of the Apes. It robs speech, it robs the ability to reason, so basically people are just running around like ape creatures, basically. And people are more violent and aggressive now. But again, Octavia Butler grounds it in a very relatable, very human manner, in a way that is just uncanny. I don't know how she does it. If I didn't already recommend Kindred, which I do, I think it's an amazing book. I do think her short stories would be a great place to start for anyone who is curious, because both of these stories are really, really good. And also, again, going back to Speech Sounds, I forgot to finish my thoughts on that, but Speech Sounds is also a story about trying to maintain hope in a really awful situation, and kind of that classic age-old apocalyptic story question, dystopian story question of, is humanity worth the effort? Like, is it really worth the time to preserve humanity? Because humanity can be really fucking stupid sometimes. We like to shoot each other, we like to bully each other, we like to cause a ruckus over bullshit that doesn't matter. Is it worth it? And this story comes up with a really interesting answer to that question. And it's also very emotionally resonant. Again, I actually like this story a lot more than I liked Bloodchild, because, again, I felt that emotional edge was a lot stronger in Speech Sounds than it was in Bloodchild. But again, I really don't know how Octavia Butler does it. If I wasn't already convinced she was one of the greats after reading Kindred, these two stories have definitely solidified that. I will definitely pick up anything that she writes. And damn, what a loss. You know, she died at the very early age of 58. That is not that old. Like, my dad is older than her. My mom is about her age right now. And my mom is not very old. So just a damn shame that she passed away so early. I mean, I can only imagine the great works she could be putting out right now. Just awful. Just a shame, to be honest. Just a shame. But yeah, so those are all the books and stories that I read during the month of September. But let's talk about comics. I only read one in particular. It was because it was Batman year. I had to read one. But also one for Year of Lemire, and that is Robin and Batman by Jeff Lemire and Dustin Nguyen. You might know them as the guys who did Descender. The art style probably gives it away. But this is basically Jeff Lemire's take on Batman and Robin. I'll just put it this way. I didn't know that you could do All-Star Batman and Robin the Boy Wonder correctly without it turning into an absolute clown fest. And don't get me wrong, I love All-Star Batman and Robin the Boy Wonder. Like, that is my guilty pleasure bad comic just ever, you know? I thank Frank Miller and Jim Lee for giving me that just horrible atrocity of a book, but I love it in a way that something should not be loved. I love it. But somehow, Jeff Lemire, the crazy bastard, he frickin' did it. He actually did All-Star Batman and Robin the Boy Wonder really well, where Batman is not a cackling lunatic. He actually feels like Batman. And the show stealer, I should say, is Dustin Nguyen's absolutely magnificent artwork. I mean, Jeff Lemire is really good at picking his collaborators, when he can pick his collaborators, I should say. I don't know how much DC and Marvel give him leeway, but in this case, I think he chose them. But he is a good eye for artists, probably because he is an artist himself. But the art from Dustin Nguyen, I mean, look at the atmosphere, the frickin' watercolors. Oh my god! Like, I finished Descender a few months ago, and he's amazing. I mean, some of the character archetypes look a little similar to Descender, but just look at that. Look at this right here. They even did the goddamn Batman bit right. Like, I don't know how Jeff Lemire did it, but it's another very solid work from Jeff Lemire, covering one of fiction's most iconic duos in Batman and Robin. And, of course, I have a soft spot in my heart for the first Robin, Dick Grayson, and that is who this book is about. So, obviously, I am totally biased towards enjoying this book. So here's some more Dustin Nguyen art. Look at the colors, man. I don't know if Dustin Nguyen did the colors himself. Let me actually look here. Did he do the colors? Let me see. Did he do the colors? It does not say. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate that. Thank you, DC. You're swell. Anyway, this is a really good book. If you're pissed off at All-Star Batman and Robin the Boy Wonder, you're just absolutely flabbergasted by that book, because I am, even though I love that book. I love it in a way that should not be loved, but I do love it. If you are curious, if you were wondering if someone actually could do that correctly, Robin and Batman would be your choice. And also, I hear that it's kind of going to be a trilogy, because Jeff Lemire, likes doing that. He's doing one with Jason Todd right now, and apparently that's really good too, so I'm looking forward to reading that one. But Robin and Batman with Dick Grayson is really good, and I really enjoy it a lot. And hopefully I'll do a review of this at some point, if I can find the time. But I read it for Batman Day, which was September the 20th. I thought it was the 17th, but it was the 20th. But I ended up doing it anyway, because, I love the Caped Crusader, and I love me some Jeff Lemire, so, yeah, Robin and Batman, very good, a beautiful art, I should say, so I think it's worth reading just for that. But the story in this is also pretty good, so it's very much, very solid Lemire, sorry, what am I saying, Letier, Lemire work. So yeah, Robin and Batman, good stuff. This was the only comic I managed to read this month, though, because I didn't really have a lot of comics to read. I didn't really have any on the plan, so sorry about that. Anyway, so yeah, that's all I read in the month of September. That's really all I have to say for today. I hope you guys enjoyed. What did you guys read during the month of September? Let me know down in the comments below. But as I always like to do, like, comment, subscribe, do all that fun stuff. You can find me on Twitter. You can also find me on Goodreads and Letterboxd, where I write reviews that are probably more coherent than the one you just heard right now. You can also find me on Instagram and Blue Sky. I am starting to get used to Blue Sky. So yeah. Oh, excuse me. Anyway, so hopefully you guys enjoyed this video, and I won't really say too much more aside from what I've already said. So yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video, and until next time, see you guys later. See you guys next month. Bye-bye.